Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best. Where the paranormal is normal. Where that which you thought you knew, you didn't. And where the future can be known, if you know exactly where to look.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Stuart, and we have the honor of having Stan Deyo with us and Larry Taylor, and we're going to kind of have, I guess, a roundtable discussion centering around, I suppose, maybe a good place to start is the arrival, the 923 star sign date, whether there's anything to it, or whether this is just some hoopla. As you probably already know from listening to the program, we have a lot of gainsayers out there that are poo-pooing all of this and saying there's absolutely nothing to it, and there is absolutely no way that Jesus Christ is going to return for his church on 922, 923, or soon thereafter. Anyway, Stan, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Good to have the invitation, guys. This 923 thing certainly has caused a stir in the church circles, hasn't it?
Oh, boy. Hi, Larry. How are you doing tonight on your mountaintop?
Oh, I'm still up here watching the sun go down, and I'll tell you what, Stan's exactly right. There has been an upheaval in I guess you could say, social media and supposedly mainstream discourses on the sign. And I appreciate what Stan had said on an earlier show about this is a great sign. Whether it's just a sign or not, we don't know, but it's a great sign. And Stan, what else we got on that?
Well, I checked out Scotty's, Scott Clark's discovery on this. He was one of the earliest ones I saw that mentioned that this alignment was going to happen on the 23rd of September, and that it perfectly mirrored what was written in Revelation 12, which John wrote under the direction of the Holy Spirit. Now, if you'll notice in Revelation 12, it does mention the Virgin with a crown of 12 stars, which typically is taken to mean that she is Israel, and that the 12 stars in her crown are the 12 tribes of Israel, and that the man-child she gives birth to is the Messiah. And fair enough, that will work for that. But the fact that this sign occurs very rarely, like this one coming the 23rd of the month, is probably the first time this has occurred since about 2003 or 4 years, going back to right around the birth of Christ time. In fact, it might be a good indicator of the true birth date of Christ. I checked this day by day myself with the Stellarium program to be sure that this wasn't nonsense. And certainly this is a very rare alignment. Now, some of the arguments from the mainstream media have been that, if this was truly the thing spoken of in Revelation 12, then there would be 12 stars in the Leo constellation sitting above the head of Virgo. But there's not. There's only 9, and they're saying that 3 bright planets are stars. Again, it's the symbolic representation that John was given. When you look up in the sky with the naked eye, you will see 12 bright stars. And you may not realize at that moment that 9 of them are stars and 3 of them are local planets, but still 12 bright lights, 3 of them being planets. Now, another article in the mainstream from some astronomer said, yeah, look, he says, you can see 9 stars in the constellation of Leo, but if you get telescopes, you can see a lot more stars than that in Leo. Well, that's not the point. These constellations were named in the ancient times, and even the stars in those constellations were named as a map, as a sign in the heavens to carry through generation after generation of humans, so that the map couldn't be altered very much at all as far as the main stars, because mankind can't get out there and change the star position. So it's very stable and not subject to human interference in what the star patterns are. Now, the names of the stars in each constellation tell about that period of time in humanity's development, working all the way from the creation to the arrival of the Messiah, the King. Now, I personally think that this sign was put up there and was mentioned to John in the Revelation so that we could know that something is about to happen, something coincident with what is written in Revelation 12 and 13 and 14 and so on beyond that, which do deal with things that will happen during the Great Tribulation period of 7 years. So is there going to be a gong sound on midnight the 23rd of this month and the tribulation starts? Don't think so. But will the tribulation start sometime around that period of time? I think so. Are we talking days or weeks or months? Yeah, maybe months. Is the rapture of the church going to occur, before that or after that tribulation period starts? There's schools of thought on it. I personally subscribe to the pre-tribulation rapture, but until the tribulation starts, until the man of sin has been revealed, the church can safely assume that the rapture has not occurred. That's what Paul was telling the Thessalonians. He said, look, don't worry, you haven't missed the boat. You're not going to have to go through the tribulation unless the man of sin has been revealed. And has he been revealed? He asked them. Well, no. Okay, so if you are here to see the man of sin revealed in the Great Tribulation period, then you've missed the boat. You haven't been caught up in the rapture. Now, the school of thought that says the rapture occurs in mid-tribulation, 3.5 years in, that might be true as well. I'm not going to be totally pedantic about pre or mid, but certainly I am going to be fairly strong in the position that there will be a rapture of the aware believers, the ones looking for the return of the Messiah. Those are in the parable of the 10 virgins, those are the 5 wise ones who kept their lamps lit and kept looking up and on the alert for the arrival of the Messiah, their bridegroom. The 5 foolish ones were like the churches today, which are saying, oh, look, a prophecy can be interpreted so many ways, and it causes division in the church. Let's have a church picnic, okay? And they forget all about this kind of stuff. Those are the ones who are going to get caught unawares, when they didn't expect it, because they aren't looking for his return. So my advice to people on this is pray every day that you're found worthy to be part of the Messiah's bride and be caught up in the rapture, whether that be at the beginning, pre-rapture, in the middle of it, or sometime in between. We know the season is upon us when we see this sign in the heavens, and so I'm encouraged by it, as are many of my fellow students of this. If we do disappear, and we are, fortunate enough to be caught up in the rapture and be delivered from the tribulation period, that'll be great, and it'll be a witness in itself to those remaining behind. And we know that Christians will be in the tribulation because those are the ones who will have to resist the numbering of the beast and, will get their heads cut off if they get caught and all kinds of stuff. Those are the ones who were foolish and didn't keep looking up every day and saying, look, Lord, here I am, Hineni in Hebrew, and, don't forget me, and I hope you find me worthy to be caught up there and to go with you. There's just so many things in the Old Testament, say, for instance, the Israeli wedding ceremony, the courtship, what you have to go through, and then to the marriage, that agree with the tribulation period of 7 years and the fact that the bride is taken out before the 7 years of tribulation. The whole argument there, but I find after studying a lot of the Hebrew and other writers on it that I'm convinced it's going to be right around the beginning of the tribulation period. I think that time is soon upon us.
Yeah, there is a lot of evidence, like you were saying, on the old ancient wedding ceremony of seven days equaling 7 years, and I don't know. It's a hard one to crack because you've got a ton of gainsayers out there, which reminds me of, I think it's Peter who says, where's the promise? They're going to start yelling, where's the promise of his coming? And that's essentially, is it not what they're saying now, the gainsayers of all this? And I've listened to the arguments that they have, and I can poke holes in every one of their arguments. It's just not legitimate.
Well, I looked at arguments that said the New Testament, is one written by men with biases, like Paul was really Saul of Tarsus, and he had a bias against Christians at that point. Even though he got converted, that there could have been changes and things added to strengthen his church at that time. But I thought, right, okay, well, let's go before the time of Jesus' arrival. Let's go back into the Torah, into the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And let's see if there are any mentions in there that could give us an idea about this rapture, whether it occurs and how it will occur and that kind of stuff. And if you look at Abraham, at his son, the betrothal of Isaac to, I think it was Rebekah, wasn't it?
Rebekah, yeah.
Abraham sent, now that's Isaac's father. Abraham sent out his own messengers, his own servants, over to a foreign land to find a bride worthy of his son Isaac. And the instructions to the servants of of Abraham was, go over there, find her. If you find one, pay a dowry to her family and bring her back to me here so that my son may marry her here, and I will prepare a place, or have my son prepare a place for them to have their honeymoon cottage here on my property. Now, that does tell us, long before Jesus arrived, that there were instructions to the house of Israel at that time, which would later be to us, is be of the wise virgins, be looking for your bridegroom. And we are that foreign country where God and Jesus live, is where represented by Abraham and Isaac in their territory. And the servants of Abraham going to look for the bride are those who are being sent, just like in the wedding ceremony that Israel practices today. They are being sent to collect the bride secretly from her dwelling and take her back at the beginning of the 7 days of feasting in the marriage ceremony where God lives and where Jesus has prepared rooms for us. That is such an old writing that it can't be messed up by modern interpretation, whatever. And the Torah has been so fastidiously copied by hand for generations that the numbers of letters and diagonals from left to right across a page of the Torah in the handwritten version have to add up to a certain number. On each page there's a number count for it. In the lines there's a number count for it. And it has to be exactly copied. It's like a photographic or a reproduced copy that can't be altered. And they've done it by hand all these years. So I'm convinced there will be a rapture. B, there will be friends of the bridegroom, and who are also servants of our God, who are sent to collect us up into the heavens secretly, and in the actual ceremony it's done at night before midnight, sometime within a year of being betrothed. Now, does that mean that this rapture will occur within a year of the sign being in the heavens? I don't know. There's a good argument for saying a rapture would occur in the barley harvest in the first quarter of next year. So anyway, no one is to know, not the bride for sure, exactly when the bridegroom will send his friends to collect them, but it will be within that year period. So I'm very optimistic about it.
Well, it's kind of interesting, actually. If you go to the Feast of Trumpets in 2018, it falls on 9/10 and 9/11. And 9/11 is a number that is constantly showing up in the occult, in the movies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it is kind of interesting. And they said that the moon was supposed to be spotted on the 20th yesterday, but it's just been spotted here a little bit ago. So how does that work now, Stan? I know it's called the long day, 48 hours, and I understand the history of it, lighting the fires so that the whole nation would know that they had entered trumpets. When would trumpets close then? Would this be on tomorrow night, on the 22nd? Or does it go into the 23rd?
Let me just check, and I'll answer you here in a second. The Feast of Trumpets, of course, is the Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish, civil New Year. The actual New Year, the rabbinical New Year, occurs in the barley harvest over in the first quarter of the next year of 2018. But this started in Israel on the 29th of Elul. Today is the first day of Tishri, the next month. And we have the candle lighting for the end of it tomorrow. And that begins the Jewish civil year of 5778. And so it would end, I assume, at the end of the day, which would not be midnight for them, probably sundown tomorrow in Israel. So on the 23rd, which is for us this Saturday, that would be the third day of the month of Tishri, and all we have there is, a Shabbat celebration the night before and that night. So.
Mm-hmm. So the shofar, the final trumpet blast, would be on the 22nd at probably around 6. Do they close everything down at 6, irrespective of when the sun sets?
I think they do now. I don't know whether they may have done it watching the physical descent of the sun, because they do measure the sighting of the new moon sliver, which occurs as you see it, not at a certain time. But I do think that this is a general sign and a sign of the times. The season is near, and so specifics of that, time and actual date, I think, are a bit flexible.
Mm-hmm. Larry, got any questions for Stan so far, or comments?
Oh, I think, I just going to tell Stan that I think that was an incredible analysis he just gave in a few minutes there. Well rounded, and it should make people think, and it really kind of gives you a 923, the star sign, and also that surrounds it as a really kind of a heads up. And I don't mean heads up like big, go down in your shelters. I mean a heads up spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting too. Yeah, go ahead, Stan.
Go on. Sorry, go on, Stuart. Go on.
Well, I was just going to mention the Jupiter. They say Jupiter got birthed out of Virgo. Well, first we had the conception comet when Jupiter entered the womb, so to speak, astronomically. Then approximately on, I think that was in November, Jupiter came out of the womb either on 9/9 or 9/11, depending on how you wanted to look at it. So they're claiming Jupiter is actually the man-child or the church. And the arguments they're presenting are pretty good arguments, actually, because Jesus, when he was here, was not immediately caught up to the throne, as it is implied in Revelation chapter 12. Israel certainly can't be that because she's still here. So the woman has to be Israel. And the argument, I guess, centers on is Jupiter, the actual man-child that's going to be snatched up in a rapture event. What's interesting is from the last blood red moon of the last tetrad was 726 days to 923. So somebody took it upon themselves to look up in the Strong's number 726, and it means rapture.
Well, that is interesting because there could have been any number of words put into Strong's Hebrew-English concordance, and he chose that because those were the ones that were found. He put them in that order. But it is interesting that it does turn out to be that. That comet you're mentioning will appear right next to the moon on the 23rd. It's comet 67P. There's another one coming, in other words, there, as Jupiter finishes its traverse around the womb of the Virgin there in the constellation. So I think it's going to be an interesting time. There's one other thing that I haven't seen anybody really deal with, which it may be nothing, but on Monday, this last Monday on the 18th of September, the moon hid the 3 planets, Mercury, Mars, Venus, that are going to form the rest of the 12 stars of that crown. They were occluded by, they were occluded by the moon. Now, that was what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 days, 5 or 6 days ahead of the 23rd, depending how you count in the calendar. And I'm trying to figure out if there's any significance to the fact that they were hidden, until they appear on the 23rd in the constellation.
Wow. Yeah,
they've come out of that occlusion already. They're out of the occlusion, but they were hidden 6 days ahead of time.
Yeah, they ought to be forming very, very close to the alignment on the 23rd at this point. That's interesting.
Hey, you guys have got if you've got a computer, or your listeners do later, if you go to my website to the pages that I set up every week, it's called the Show Images page. If you go to standeyo.com and just look over there where it has the YouTube sign, and underneath it, it'll be Show Images. You click on that, and I've numbered these slides that I've put up. I leave some of them up permanently, and others, are week-to-week changes. But if you look at slides 22, 23, and 24, in fact, the 3 slides under that as well, from 19 through 21. But look at 22, and you'll see there's a very nice graphic been made by this group studying the Revelation 12 sign. And if you click the text instead of the picture, it'll take you to their site, where they go through an explanation of the birthing of the sons and the king and that kind of stuff. And each one of those is an explanation of a different facet of this 23 September alignment. I think it's worth people studying to see that. As I said, I didn't see in there anything about the moon occluding those 3 planets, and it may mean nothing. A chap brought that to my attention on Tuesday, and I have no answer for him on it, but it is odd that they were hidden and then revealed, and they're going to be revealed right next to each other. That's just interesting.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of things. If you just took the star sign by itself, I think you could just say, well, yeah, that's very interesting, and maybe it really does mean something. It does match up what's in the scripture, but there's a whole lot more going on other than just the star sign itself. And that's what has really convinced me that this is something very unusual that's occurring all over the world. And, we've got Kimmy the Rocket Man now threatening to, destroy the United States, which he may well do. I guess they've increased the sanctions on him, and from what I gather, the sanctions that they're using will all but destroy him. What do you think?
I think where there's a will, there's a way, and he's already got the money and the stuff. He must have a storage house full of rockets already. I mean, he's been shooting them off just like they were 4th of July fireworks.
Yes.
So the stuff that he could do damage with, he's probably already got. And it may cause his people more and more problems as far as food and medicine, things that they need. It's interesting that South Korea is kind of, warming toward North Korea now, in fear of North Korea attacking them. I mean,
yes.
And if the Rocket Man wanted to put a few rockets down there to South Korea with nukes on them, it'd be virtually impossible for the U.S. presence there, and certainly not the South Koreans, to stop it. They just have to be prepared to take a hit or two. So realizing the danger of the situation, and realizing also that something's wrong with our U.S. naval ships. I mean, 4 of them, in this year, 4 go aground or hit some other ship, and they're blaming it on bad piloting. No way. We know that the Russians and the Americans, and I'm sure the Chinese, have these microwave drones, which act like a local EMP. And if they hit our ships, they can screw up the computer system, lock it, and you're going to be lucky to move the ship at all, whether you get hit or not. And so the South Koreans will be thinking, the U.S. can't really handle whatever it is that's doing something to their ships, and that's what we depend on over here for interceptors. Maybe we better start warming to what Rocket Man is saying, to not make him mad, because we feel defenseless. That's all I can figure is the main thrust of their warming toward the guy. But that is the modern equivalent of World War I's Balkan powder keg, where they assassinated the Archduke. That whole area erupted because of that assassination. Now we sit here poised where China and the United States really are kind of at odds, and justifiably so on our part. Russia and the United States are at odds for a number of reasons. The Cold War is definitely in progress again, but it's heating up. And when Holly and I were invited down to the Hopi reservation here in '96, one thing that they did tell us was that their prophecy keeper man said, look, there's going to be first a multifaceted civil disorder like civil war, multifaceted in the United States, where religious factions will fight, where black and white, genetic groups will fight, and rich and poor will fight. And he said it's going to be so many-sided that America will be collapsed by this, and the administration may or may not have time to get martial law declared in various places. But while that's happening internally, and with all the other stresses we've got on us right now as far as monetary and rebuilding stresses from hurricanes and possibly from earthquakes in the next few weeks, we are really weak. And at that time is the best time for foreign powers who are geared to do so to invade us. And the Hopi said, and they will invade. Russia and China will invade, and they'll have the help of a Middle Eastern country, which will join the invasion. But they will not stay long. They'll come to America after causing mass destruction. They will go on land, but then they will retreat and leave America, destroyed. They won't want it either, probably from nuclear devastation and from all kinds of other things that will come as a result of the invasion. But the Hopi said there is hope, and they said something that almost makes you think that George Washington's dream really did happen, because they said when this is all finished and water flows between the mesas here in Arizona, between our mesas, we will go up into the Four Corners region, near the Four Corners to Colorado, and there will be a new America formed, a new nation formed, which will be Hopi and Navajo and the survivors of the great invasion of America. So they're telling us that something is coming as well. And I think it's more like in the biblical terms that we are like a modern Babylon, and in 1 hour we're going to be burned to the ground as a nation. And it'll be reconstruction after that.
Well, there's no question that we have made a lot of enemies, and it makes me wonder, what's your take on Donald Trump? I'm still trying to figure him out. I know they say that maybe he's Cyrus, and he's going to perform this thing for Israel, but the deep state seems to have absolutely surrounded him.
Oh, I'm sure they have. It would be almost impossible for a really good-intentioned person to get in there and clean up the mess that has taken decades to build. Now, after World War II, there were a number of generals and military people, my dad was one of them, that knew about the Russian intent to invade the United States with fifth columnists to pollute our education system in religion and in the normal, scholarly things in university, to turn us into a socialist-loving type country. The reason being that they would be able to take over the United States from within at some point in the future in the long-range plans, which are coming to fruition now, I'm sure. So with this, you can see that we are at the point where revolution is almost destined to happen right now. So Donald Trump, as good as he might be, as good intentions he might be, he cannot stop this huge amount, this huge mass of change that has been instituted by the Russian communists who have infiltrated us. It's just the snowball's rolling downhill, and he's come into power, right down toward the point where the snowball is going to hit, the bottom and crash and will be blown apart. So I think he's trying. I don't think he is a openly professed believer. He does quote the Bible, but I don't think he's there yet. And when he talks about making a peace treaty between Israel and the Arab nations and Palestine, this worries me. I know it's his son-in-law, that's doing the negotiations in Egypt and with the Arab states now, but they're getting very close to drafting a peace treaty between Israel and the Arab nations. Now, if he does that, it lays the groundwork for the Antichrist to endorse it. And in my opinion, I think we're going to see an Arab do that. The Antichrist, the first beast in the Revelation of John, doesn't serve long. He has a short fate. And the real actions, the numbering and that kind of stuff, occur with the second beast, the false prophet. And I think that will be up in Europe somewhere, maybe from Turkey or like Erdogan or somebody like that. But we're going to see first an Arab consortium that will trick Israel and invade it. And I think that's going to be before the Russian invasion.
Larry, what do you think?
Yeah, as Stuart, as Stan was talking, I've got a question for him. I've been watching very closely after a few of his programs with us. Number one, Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general in Syria, how he's still there and has survived all he's survived, and he's still pushing towards the Israeli border and the Golan with forces. And then again, on the other hand, Stan had pointed at one time also, said keep your eye on the Saudi crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, and he's really come out lately. There's been some secret meetings going on with Washington by him, and then there's rumors that he had went to Israel and had a meeting about some type of regional peace plan. And when he went back home, some of the press was indicating that there was a secret night purge of a lot of his opposition. They were being rounded up during the night and were incommunicado. So, Stan, can you talk about those two individuals? I know you pointed at them one time before and said watch them.
Yeah. I think that the Saudi prince has the credentials, the activity to most likely be the Middle East Arab Antichrist. And the reason I say this is because he's chomping at the bit to take over his father's reigns, and they were going to have King Solomon, his father, abdicate the throne and turn it over to his son. Last week they were talking about, now they've cooled that off a bit. They've delayed it for some reason. But I can tell you that Mohammed bin Salman, we'll call him MBS, because that's what they call him in the halls of power over there. MBS is about to form, or to take the 34 nations he's formed into a consortium, the 34 Arab nations, and they're going to attack Iran. They don't like Iran. They don't like Iran's version of Islam. They are at odds with each other over that. And the peace deal that MBS has been negotiating with Netanyahu and with our government seems all really good on the surface. And, these secret meetings, I'm thinking, were so that MBS could lay the seeds of trust, as it were, with Netanyahu. And whether Netanyahu and the rest of his cabinet agree to this or believe it or not, I don't know. But it's, in essence, trying to end the long-term Arab nation boycott of Israel. And it all looks like love, peace, and harmony. And when MBS takes his consortium of 34 Arab nations, which doesn't include Iran or Syria, and allegedly moves their forces in position to attack Iran and the Iranian forces under Soleimani in Syria, it also puts the Arab forces in position to drop right down from the Golan Heights into northern Israel and to invade Israel. And it only takes a left turn of a few miles at that point for the 34 Arab nation consortium to be invading Israel instead of Iran, or both. So I'm watching this activity over there very closely because it just has the makings of a great deception. And this MBS, the Crown Prince, he is so wanting to take the reins. You're like a young man trying to be, Superman as he takes over the reins of his father's company, or the country in this case. But still, it's like the young man syndrome. He's going to get out there and he's going to prove how great he is. And he's itching for the fight to settle the deal with Israel. And even though they say that it's a peaceful arrangement between them, I think it's a lie. The Muslims say you can lie to further the faith. It's okay. Lie to the unbelievers. And so I don't trust him. And even though he's failed in his Yemen war down there, he's cut his teeth in warfare and how people react and urban fighting and this kind of stuff, which gives him the education he needs to make the attack on Israel. So I'm watching him. I just think that very shortly he's going to do something spectacular, and I do believe he will make himself the Antichrist.
Do you suppose that Daniel chapter 8, which more or less indicates Iran just suddenly, without any warning, goes on a blitzkrieg in all directions, that would trigger, let me put it this way. Do you think the wars of Isaiah 17 and possibly Daniel 8 have to occur before any peace agreement is hammered out? In fact, possibly it causes the peace agreement. In other words, we get into a big fight and possibly even nuclear, and then we have that peace agreement that they're trying to work out right now. What do you think?
I think so. Holly wrote a lot about this in her last book, The Prophetic Perils.
Yes.
And I think she's right. I think that we're going to see this Arab consortium in the conflict that they caused between Israel, Syria, Iran, and the Saudi allies. This will probably precipitate nuclear attacks by Israel on the Saudi forces who try to, invade and take over Israel. Because, as Holly shows in the book there, after the war is over, after that invasion, that quick thing is over, the Arab forces will have been, decimated, by fire and stuff, and Israel will take over the northern half of Saudi Arabia, probably all the way down to Riyadh. That's where the map goes as part of their ancient territory. And for them to do that, they must have wounded the heck out of the Saudis. And to me, that would be no great loss. But anyway, the Arabs are going to get a surprise at the nuclear arsenal, and that would mean that the world, especially the Arab nations and European nations surrounding Israel, would be frightened to death. Because if Israel does finally publicly admit, yeah, we've got nuclear devices, and oh yeah, they're tactical, and oh yeah, they wipe out our enemies and leave the real estate intact, they're neutron bombs, the world is then going to be frightened, because if Israel uses it, it'll use it again if people try to step on them. And this will force, as you were suggesting, the demand for a peace treaty between Israel and the many nations.
A very interesting scenario. Considering 923, the other thing I wanted to get into, Jupiter always represented, I guess you could almost call it Apollyon. And if you go into the Sybil prophecies, it talks about the arrival back here. And so I was curious as to your thoughts on 923 being a possible, or around that date, an arrival. Because I know you've done a lot of research in your book on it, and how Daniel portrays it. And it's not going to, evidently not very pleasant. Could you get into that a little bit for the listeners? We had a lot of new listeners, so.
Well, okay, I'd added that chapter as an appendix to the Cosmic Conspiracy in 2010 in the final edition, where I analyzed some of the verses in Daniel regarding this Antichrist and Satan posing as an angel of light comes in and anoints a world leader, and the Antichrist works with him to get weapons and that kind of stuff. And so if this happens, that we have the Arab invasion attempt of Israel in the next few months, then I would say we're very close to seeing the arrival of Satan's technological miracles, the saucers, the elder brothers from space, all that lie, a great deception, at the very moment when the people of Earth are frightened of being annihilated by nuclear war, by solar problems, global heating, not warming, but global heating, with droughts, with hurricanes, with earthquakes, and with food shortages, and with the attendant collapse of the world economy and stock markets. People are going to be panicked, and they're going to want someone to give them order, and that's when they will happily receive the Antichrist appointed by these elder brothers in space who say, look, we've solved where we live, we know how to bring peace, trust us, and we'll organize your planet, and everyone will have food and shelter and a job and medical care and, protection. And people will rush to him, they don't have to be taken over. I mean, Hitler proved that, he proved that with his people.
Yeah. So the arrival could occur at any time, basically, from now on, do you think? Or do you think it's going to wait until there's a war?
Well, I think that it'll happen right around the time somebody uses nukes in a local or global war. I don't know that we'll see the World War III event where Russia and China and America get into throwing bombs at each other just yet. We might, but the stage is being set more for a Middle Eastern use of nuclear weapons, and that could happen, as you say, any tick of the clock. And there are just so many variables in that as to when it's going to happen. I just say, gotta keep reading the newspaper every day because it's upon us soon.
Yeah. Larry, got any other questions?
Well, I was just thinking about what Stan was talking about, the Middle East. Absolutely. I can get on the Internet 2 or 3 times a day, and every time I get on it, something's changed. It's moving so fast. Stan, what's your feelings right now about, the left right now is attacking the Drudge Report, and I'm sure you know who that is, and and of course Breitbart and others. Where are we leaning towards more censorship, or do you see a path through all this for people to receive alternative news other than mainstream media, which is really propaganda?
Well, I do think that now that the control of the Internet has moved over to Europe, that it's out of our hands to really influence that, in a favorable manner. And I think that with the leaking of, hundreds of millions of people's personal data, in data breaches, that we're primed for a situation where there will be a panic amongst the people of the world because everybody has credit cards across the planet, basically. And when their personal information is compromised and they start to see their bank accounts frozen or drained, there will be an absolute demand, a cry for someone to solve this, to get those criminals, and stop the hurt, as it were. So at that point, we're looking at people panicking, and I'd say that tells us that sometime between now and the end of the year, we're probably going to see. We see the formation of it. We're going to see these things all come to a head, and the Antichrist will be appointed at some time right around then by the elder brothers in space. Again, being Satan and his minions, in my opinion. That's the only thing I can think of that would fit Jesus's mention in Matthew 24 of beware, because they're going to come posing as messengers, angels of light. And it's a grand deception, a great deception. It's going to fool everyone except the very elect. And I assume that probably means Israel, because they will be left here during that time, and the church itself will be gone. I'm not replacing the elect by the church, because I think the church will have gone. I want to make that distinction clear.
There's no question that in Daniel's prophecy that the 70th week, it says, is for thy people and thy holy city. So the church isn't even mentioned at all. So that indicates that the church is probably gone, as in Revelation after the chapters 2 and 3, there's no more mention, basically, of the church at all.
Yeah, I agree.
So it gets very, very interesting.
When you look around, in fact, sorry, go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just got a phone call today from a lady who was buying one of our books, and she was having a bit of trouble with her shopping cart, and so we were talking about that, and then we got to talking about where she went to church. She says, well, my husband and I, she said, we've been going to church for a number of years in various congregations. We've moved from one to the other, trying to find ones that would discuss prophecy and current events, and, these are important things, and they just weren't doing it. And when I took Holly's book, she said, when I took Holly's book, Prophetic Perils, over the last 8 months and started sharing, with my church membership, she said they just were shocked and frightened, and most of them thought, you're just an alarmist. Their pastor quit, over all this hoopla, a number of people left the church, including this lady. She says, I'm never, ever going to go to another church that has drums and a band playing in the front. They just aren't with it, you know. They've lost the plot. So
well, it is.
I just thought I'd share that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's turned into what do we say, kind of a music center. If they read the Bible at all, they're probably very fortunate.
Yeah, I know. And they don't want to, the leadership of these churches, you know, don't want to see the collection plate diminish, so they will preach what people want to hear, so they'll put the coins in the plate, which is forcing us into the position we are now, where we have a virtual Christian church in the underground here. You know, we're on the internet and house to house and that kind of stuff, not in formal religions.
What is your take on the solar eclipse? Larry, if you got another question, go ahead before you get into that.
No, go ahead, because that is interesting.
Well, I was wondering about the solar eclipse that took place on the 21st, as you know, of August. 33 days later, and 33 is a number of promise, comes the 9/23 date, and then 7 days later comes atonement. And it almost seems like they're being warned that the 7 days is equivalent to the 7 years, and when Jesus comes back on atonement and returns to the earth. But what I was wondering about, a lot of people were saying that probably was the sign of Jonah, and America was given 40 days to repent, or the Lord would take them out. What's your take on that? 40 days.
I think that's a very good analogy of that. I've read that too on the internet, and it is like the Jonah warning. You know, I've also heard some people that were poo-pooing the idea of a rapture, saying Jesus is not going to come to the earth, you know, until the end of the tribulation period. Now, and that may be well true, because in the rapture, I just want to make this point, it doesn't say Jesus is going to collect you up. It says his father's, they're going to collect you up in the clouds to a meeting with the Lord, but he's not coming back then. He comes back at the end of the tribulation. So there's, you know, people that say he's going to come, the world's going to end, all that stuff, they haven't studied the Bible at all, and that's not surprising because it's left-wing liberal media. But anyway,
So well, you follow Earth Changes a lot, and right after the eclipse, I think it was 4 days later that Harvey hit. Then not too long after that, we had Irma, and what do you think is coming next? If you're going to try to hammer a nation into repentance, it's certainly not going to stop with those two events. What do you think?
No, I think next will be earthquakes. You know, if we
where do you think they'll hit?
Well, all right, where they'll hit in just a second. If the Trump administration does organize that peace treaty with the Palestinians and Israel, and it does end up partitioning Israel, that's dividing Israel. The punishment to us will be dividing America, and I think it will physically divide, probably along the New Madrid and on the West Coast along the San Andreas fault line. Those two. I think Jonathan Cahn, Rabbi Cahn, has covered that in his books, which are quite extraordinary, the parallels he draws out of the Bible and the United States. And, there's the warning. If you divide God's apple, Israel, he's going to divide you. And that's what I see coming. We are seeing this in the mainstream media about the peace treaty negotiations right now, first with Egypt, then with some of the Arab nations that are allied with them and the Saudis. And, of course, the Palestinians will join in with this because they're pushing for this Palestinian state, dividing Israel.
Wow.
And let's look for it. They've been talking about using a blueprint from the Oslo Accords in the 90s, which it was a 7-year suck-it-and-see type policy, or treaty. And if they revive that as the basis for this treaty now, that'll be very prophetic.
Well, it was very odd that Obama was given the peace accord in Oslo, given the, what do they call that thing he got? The World Peace Award, or whatever they call it. And and that was in Oslo as the great peacemaker. Now, if we get into a war, what's your take on this? Let's say let's say North Korea is goaded into launching a few missiles our way, or Hawaii. Trump is going to get blamed for that, don't you think? And would that eliminate Trump?
Well, they're certainly trying, and they're already blaming him. I can't believe this. Holly and I were talking about it last night. I was astounded at this when she was telling me. They're blaming Trump for the hurricanes. How they extrapolate that, I don't know. But, the guy...
As long as he's alive, he is responsible for everything on Earth and probably in the heavens as well, according to the left. What's your take on that, Larry? Go ahead.
They want him gone, and it's odd that Obama and Valerie and his entourage are operating out of a house that he's placed right close to the Capitol, to the White House. He's hanging around like a bad smell and organizing with Soros and others the resistance to the Trump administration. Now, it's like they think that there's going to be some event later where somehow he will be able to either take office again, which is impossible by the Constitution, or he will heavily influence whoever does take the office in place of Trump and perhaps Pence. I mean, they got to take them both out. I don't know how they're going to do that, but this is what the great fear is.
Well, yeah, there were a lot of Christians when Obama was in office, and you remember they all said, well, the 44th president was the last one, and then it seems like the Lord caused that sandstorm there in Israel to delay everything for 2 years, and along comes Trump throwing a monkey wrench into their works. But if the deep state or the communists are going to come in, he has to go one way or another. They got to get rid of him.
Well, we pray for his protection, for him and for Pence and their families and his administration against these attacks. And because we realize that they're doing their best to take him out one way or another, legally or, drastically somehow or another. And so we pray for him. I know he doesn't make all the right decisions according to the Lord's will, but the Lord is allowing him to do what he's doing to perhaps buy the Christian faith time, and to buy time for those who are on the verge of believing and accepting Jesus to make their decision before the curtain goes down.
Yeah. What's your take, Larry?
Oh, I agree. Matter of fact, I've been very concerned about this Muellerism that's it's like a disease. Mueller trying to take down Trump because he is absolutely on a runaway train right now trying to destroy the Trump White House and the Trump presidency. And that's very disconcerting. And, Stan, I was going to ask you, too, somewhat about the arrival. We were talking about, I know at one time you had posted some stuff on, like the old movie V. How do you see the arrival basically coming? Because we've been, Stuart and I both have talked to a guy. He's passed away now, named Red Elk before, and he would talk about things that were under the surface of the planet or the face of the earth. Talking about Genesis, when everything that was evil was removed from the face of the earth. But it doesn't say anything below that was removed. You see, and Red Elk had indicated there was going to be a breaking out of those things underground, and I know that you do support I believe you support a hollow earth theory to some degree, and inside Antarctica and the other parts. What do you see in an arrival? Can it be both, from outside and from within, maybe at the same time?
Well, they may claim to be from off the planet, which of course they are. I mean, Satan is from a parallel universe where God dwells, and he's cast here, and his minions are cast here in the last days of this age. Mm-hmm. But they do have underground facilities, which, the program was with Dr. Teller, Edward Teller. They helped these alien critters to build underground manufacturing and research facilities in the United States, in Australia. When I say United States territory, under the ocean at the South Pole, in Australia for sure, in the outback there. these things were using us, these critters, were using us to establish a manufacturing complex so they could make instrumentation and things, weapons and things that they needed to fight Jesus in the last great battle that they will fight him with on the surface of the earth, and the Armageddon battle. And so, sure, they will come from underneath the earth where they are stored, where their equipment and civilization has been hiding. Whether the Admiral Byrd story, from his alleged from his diary, that he was able to fly, down inside the earth over the polar region and then come out, back up and out the other side. Don't know whether that's true or not, but certainly I do espouse the theory that planets, not only the earth, but planets do have layers inside the planets, some of which can be hollow. And I think that the place where God has cast the demons and disembodied spirits inside the earth is inside, one of these hollows in one of these shells where they can't get to the surface until the plug is removed by one of God's angels to let them loose. There's indirect reference to that in the prophecies in the Bible. So, yeah, they can still be there, but claim to have been, watching us and helping mankind through the ages, even though they come from a distant star system. They can make that claim, but they're obviously going to be not from around here. They're not Earth kind of people, even though they look human in their form, being a slightly taller, maybe a foot or two taller than the average human, and their skin is kind of, shimmers in the sunlight like an oil spill would on the concrete. Very rainbowy type colors from the scale in their skin cells. They might have lizard or reptilian DNA, and all these things would add up to them being a foreign species to us, much like Satan when he tempted Eve in the garden. When God punished him, he cast him on the ground like a snake, a reptile, to crawl on his belly on the earth because he'd violated the order to stay away from Adam and Eve. So yeah, what Retta was saying is very happily what the Bible would be discussing, and what we know from Teller's group is present here on the planet now, and has been, as far as we know, since the late 40s, when we started helping them build these underground facilities. So it all fits. I wouldn't argue with that at all. And I think that time is coming.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're going to surface sooner or later, if they haven't already, incognito, which a lot of people think that's happened. We got about 2 minutes left. What's your take on all these Mothman sightings that are going on in Chicago? And there's been a number of visions of a huge earthquake that empties basically Michigan, Lake Michigan, and it goes down through to the Gulf. So I have to make it kind of short so we don't run out of time.
Yeah, quickly, that would be the Lake Michigan emptying down into the Mississippi basin there would most probably be due to a fracture, an earthquake along the New Madrid as a result of the United States, of course, organizing that treaty to divide Israel. And another thing, too, with the alleged alien invasion, for people to be looking forward to that and crying out for it, one thing that's going to be probably coincident with their arrival officially is the removal of a large section of the population that are Christians. That rapture can trigger the chaos in administrative levels all over the planet that would require a new government, with no track record, no religious connections, no political, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what I see coming very soon.
Okay, how do they reach you, Stan?
Our website, standeyo.com, and our email addresses for Holly and I both are at the end of that page. You can contact us that way.
Does Prophetic Pearls and Dare to Prepare and the Cosmic Conspiracy, can they still get those?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. We've been selling quite a few of them the last few weeks as people get to realize that things are being prophetically fulfilled. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on, Larry. Thank you for joining with us, too. Any last comment you might have, Larry?